Please welcome Paula Dwyer, President of the Overseas Press Club of America.
Welcome, everybody, to the 82nd Annual Awards of the Overseas Press Club of America. I'm Paula Dwyer, and I have the great honor of being the OPC President. Our dinner this year is better late than never, 18 months late to be exact. We have so much to celebrate tonight. First, our 2021 award winners. And we also want to recognize our 2020 award winners who were deprived of a dinner in their honor. So I'm pleased to see there are several here tonight, so we'll get back to them a little later. But we should especially celebrate the fact that we are all here, live and in person, and hopefully healthy. So I want to toast everybody here. Here's to all the reporters, the editors, the photographers, the graphic artists, the videographers, the podcasters, the cartoonists, and media executives. Thank you for persisting through a global pandemic and continuing to bring the world to us. I would also like to heartily thank our corporate sponsors, without whom this dinner wouldn't be possible. Thank you to Reuters for that wonderful pre-dinner reception, and to my own employer, Bloomberg, for the after-dinner party. Thank you also to Teneo, Salesforce, AIG, Boston Consulting Group, Citi, Daimler, Facebook, Google, ABC News, the Associated Press, the Financial Times, Frontline, the Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, Viacom, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, which bought 2 tables this year, by the way. Well done. A glitzy evening like this would not be possible without many hours of preparation and attention to thousands of minute detail. I want to thank OPC President Patricia Kranz, sitting right here at table 2, the great Patricia Kranz, for doing all the work that went into making tonight a success. She makes it look easy, but I'm here to tell you it is not. I urge you to take a look at your issue of Dateline magazine, which should be at your seat. COVID-19 may have prevented us from holding our gala last year, but as you will see, it didn't stop correspondents from going to the front lines to cover the unfolding pandemic, or to document the existence of internment camps in China, or the militarization of the Mexico border. You can read all about these stories in your Dateline magazine. And thanks go to Michael Serrell, Vera Naughton, Bob Nicholsberg, and Patricia for putting Dateline together. In 2020, journalists exposed the exploitation of workers in Indonesia, revealed how millions of Muslims were at risk of losing their Indian citizenship, and explained how the CIA operated militias in Afghanistan. You investigated the downfall of one of Europe's highest flying financial technology firms. You uncovered government and corporate neglect in the collapse of a Brazilian dam. You visually told the story of World War II sex slaves in the Philippines and showed how forces ranging from colonialism to social media shaped life in West Africa today. These are just some of the storylines behind our 22 award winners this year. Global journalism is indeed alive and well. A hearty congratulations to all the winners. While we all tried to carry on as usual, in my 43 years as a journalist, I've never seen a year quite like 2020. Our occupation has always been on a rough and tumble playing field, and most journalists are pretty tough-skinned. Sadly, though, it was harder and more life-threatening to practice our trade. More journalists than ever, 274 worldwide, were in jail last year. 32 media workers were killed. That's 20% more than in 2019. Authoritarian governments, from China to Hungary to Nicaragua, are increasingly revoking press freedoms, leaving the world unable to decipher fact from fiction. I was thus extremely pleased when the Nobel Prize Committee on October 8 awarded the Nobel Peace Prize to 2 journalists. And you all know Maria Ressa of the Philippines and Dmitry Muratov of Russia. Exposing corruption, the lack of accountability, and the absence of any semblance of a rule of law in their countries' authoritarian regimes are what got them their coveted prize. Those are the hallmarks of what much of global journalism is all about, and the bedrock principles of the Overseas Press Club. We have a tradition at our annual awards dinner of lighting a candle in honor of those who have been imprisoned, harassed, lost, or killed while in the line of duty. To most of us here tonight, journalism isn't just a job. We feel a deep sense of responsibility to find the truth and inform the world. That's what drove Danish Siddiqui, a 38-year-old Reuters photojournalist, into Afghanistan in the final weeks of the US occupation. He was killed on July 16, 2021, near Kandahar. Danish was there to take photographs as Taliban forces were sweeping the countryside, toppling one province after another. Danish, the father of 2 small children, was one of India's most recognized and celebrated photojournalists. He shared a Pulitzer Prize with colleagues for his images of the Rohingya exodus from Myanmar in 2018. Back in India, he didn't shy away from documenting the growing tensions between India's Hindu majority and the large Muslim minority. Nor did he shy away from covering the Indian government's mishandling of the COVID pandemic. In a TED Talk in 2020, Danish said, "My role is as a mirror, and I want to expose you to the raw truth and make you a witness to it. You can look away or stand up and act for courage." Now we will watch a video made for us by Danish's wife, Rike.
The wound left by my husband's death is still fresh, is still a painful reminder of his absence. It is hard for me to find the words to express myself, as the void left by the loss of my soulmate and the father of our 2 young children has cut deep and will never be filled again. On behalf of our family, though, I would like to thank the Overseas Press Club for remembering Danish and honoring his work and legacy. Journalism was not merely his profession, but his passion. Danish wanted to capture and show the world images that many would have rather avoided. Danish didn't look through the lens with his eyes alone. It was his heart and his deeply rooted, caring soul that captured the world around him. He was driven by the hope that his pictures would touch at least one single person and push them to stand up and demand change. Even though the loss of Danish has left us overcome with grief, I hope that this spirit of his will live on in our children. And I hope that his work will continue to inspire journalists for generations to come. Thank you.
Rike, if you are watching, thank you for such a moving tribute to Danish. Now, I would like to call Michael Williams, Global Enterprise Editor at Reuters, who will say a few words about Danish and his work. He will light the candle of remembrance, followed by a moment of silence. And on the screen, you will see a tribute to OPC members who have passed on since our last dinner in 2019.
Thank you, Paula. We've heard from Paula what it was about Danish that made him such a great, tremendous talent. We all know that he produced work of great moral force. I wanted to tell you something else about him, about an additional impact he had on our newsroom. And that is the joy he showed in doing his journalism and the immense fun that he had on the job. He was so full of that vitality that he just raised the game of everybody else around him in our newsroom who worked with him. That's another reason why he was part of the heart and soul of Reuters. I know that you all have people like Danish in your newsroom, people with that same intense love for what we do and that intense, sometimes mischievous sense of fun, the delight in what we do. So I'd like to light the candle this year for people like that who we've lost since the last time we met more than 2.5 years ago. And also to remember to cherish those kinds of people who we still have in our newsrooms. Thank you. Need more experience at the barbecue. Trick candle. And now the moment of silence.
Thank you, Mike. All right, I have one more thing I want to say. I promise I'll stop talking and we'll get to the real reason we're here tonight. I draw your attention to the cards you were handed when you arrived. On the back, it explains how you can donate to the Overseas Press Club's effort to raise funds for dozens and dozens of Afghan journalists who are now refugees. These brave, mostly young, highly dedicated men and women had been doing what we take for granted here, gathering information to keep Afghans informed about the US occupation, their government, their religious leaders, their local authorities, their schools. Doing those basic journalistic duties was life-threatening when the Taliban took over. Many of them fled, and they're now trying to scrape out an existence on military bases in the US or in other countries, awaiting asylum and visas and whatever the future may bring. Some of them, like Anissa Shahid, are accomplished young journalists who would offer wisdom and insight to any American newsroom. Anissa was Talo TV's main correspondent. She worked bravely for years, even going out into the field as the campaign to kill professional women ramped up. She's now in Wisconsin, trying to figure out what to do next. Then there's Taban Ibraz, who had her own current affairs show on Afghan TV, and at 26 started her own YouTube show, in which she interviewed high-profile figures in politics and business while they were bowling. That's right, while they were bowling. It was a really successful show. She fled when Kabul fell and is in Virginia. Some of the journalists who left don't have English language skills. Some only have the clothes they were wearing when they left. Some don't know if they will ever work again in their chosen field. So the OPC is joining with many other media organizations to raise funds that will be used to help retrain and relocate these journalists. We might be able to find media companies that can provide jobs or internships. We might be able to provide much needed counseling or just money to tide them over until they can figure out next steps. So please be generous. Help us help these people. Their lives have been upended because they were doing what we in this room do every day and don't give it a second thought. And thank you very much to everybody who is able to contribute. Okay, I want to turn now for the reason we're all gathered here tonight to honor the best and brightest in global journalism. I want to thank OPC Governor Scott Kraft. He's going to be up. Where is he? Where's Scott? There he is. Okay. Scott is the managing editor at the Los Angeles Times, and every year for 5 years, we ask him to oversee our awards program, and every year for 5 years, he has said yes. So that's some dedication, Scott. I want you to stand. You're not going to get away with that little bit of applause. Yay, Scott. And now we're going to hear a few words from Scott up there.
Good evening. The selection process that led to tonight's awards began early this year when we invited 100 jurors to judge the work of our colleagues during calendar year 2020. Our judges themselves were an impressive collection of talent and included journalists, authors, and academics. Among them were former OPC and Pulitzer Prize winners, as well as National Book Award finalists and Emmy winners. Jurors were assigned to the 22 categories, and the panels reviewed more than 400 total entries. The quality of the work we saw was among the highest in the history of the competition, which was surprising and truly heartening during a year in which the pandemic made it harder than ever to do on-the-ground global reporting. As might be expected, the spread of COVID-19 was one of the leading storylines among the winners, but it wasn't the only one. The judges also honored powerful reporting on human rights abuses, on corruption in business and government, and on climate change. And the winning work truly spanned the globe, coming from Mexico, Brazil, Russia, China, India, Afghanistan, and points in between. Time and again, the journalists we honor tonight showed remarkable tenacity and courage. Also, in several cases, the work showcased groundbreaking data tools, finding new ways to uncover stories and truths that otherwise would have been hidden. The work of our winners and runner-up citations, taken together, was a master class in elevated, evocative, and powerful storytelling. As several jurors noted, these stories, in video and audio, photography and text, made them so very proud of our profession. I couldn't agree more. Congratulations to all of tonight's winners, And a special thank you to the teams of judges who so generously gave their time to help make it possible for us to honor this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. All right, let's get to the meat of tonight's program. Your host and award presenter tonight will be John Avallone. He's a senior political analyst and an anchor at CNN, as you all know. He is known by me and many others as the talented one-man Truth Squad with his reality check segments on New Day. Before CNN, John was the editor-in-chief of the Daily Beast, and prior to that, he wore many hats, including as a columnist and an editor for the New York Sun, and chief speechwriter for the one and only Rudy Giuliani when he was mayor of New York. John is the author of several books and numerous essays, and I'm proud to say he's an OPC board member who has given generously of his time, as he is doing tonight. Take it away, John.
All right, it is an honor to be here tonight to host the presentation of the OPC Awards to the journalists we're going to honor this evening, who are the best of the best, the bravest of the bravest, at a time when journalism is more important, I believe, than ever before. This year, though, we're going to change things up a little bit, give you plenty of time to eat and drink and talk to your friends. Instead of presenting all 22 awards at once throughout the evening, we're going to break it up into smaller groups with interspersing with other segments. And each winner or group of winners has pre-recorded a video describing their work. So following that video, this is how it's going to work. They're going to come on up, we're going to give them an award, take a photograph, and they will bask in your applause. And that will how the evening will move forward. And the awards are going to be announced in the order they are in your Dateline magazine. You have each a copy at your table, so please feel free to follow along, and let's get this party started. Number 1, the Hal Boyle Award, sponsored by Norm Pearlstein in honor of his friend Jerry Flint, is for Best Newspaper, News Service, or Digital Reporting from Abroad. And the winner is Andrew Quilty of The Intercept for the CIA's Afghan death squads. In nearly 2 years of painstaking reporting, Andrew exposed U.S.-backed campaign of terror against civilians in Afghanistan, detailing evidence of massacres, executions, mutilations, forced disappearances, and airstrikes. He documented how 10 CIA-backed raids in Wardak province killed 51 civilians. Some were as young as 8 years old. Most of these raids had never been reported. Let's watch.
Hello, my name's Andrew Quilty. I'm an Australian freelance journalist based in Kabul, Afghanistan, working for various publications, including The Intercept, who commissioned and published this story. Reporting for this story began in early 2019 when I heard the account of a family who lost 4 members in a night raid conducted by a CIA-led Afghan militia. By pulling on that single thread, I subsequently learned that this wasn't just an isolated incident, but one among dozens of similar incidents conducted by the same CIA-led militia, resulting in more than 50 civilian casualties, some boys as young as 8 years old. What appeared to be a deliberate campaign aimed at striking fear into the residents of this single province was being conducted over the same period that the Trump administration was conducting peace talks with the Taliban in Doha. The process of reporting this story was an arduous one and required the help of Afghan colleagues who made dozens of trips from Kabul into Wardak province, across front lines, into Taliban-controlled areas where they would collect witnesses and survivors of these raids, bring them back across the front lines into Kabul, where I would then interview them. Finally, I'd like to thank my editor at The Intercept, Vanessa Jazari. Vanessa showed tremendous courage commissioning this story at all. For one, I was a photographer, and 2, the few stories I had written had never been anywhere near as ambitious as this one. Vanessa's rigour in editing and meticulous attention to detail also gave me extreme confidence in the publication of the story that we had got everything absolutely right. I'd like to thank the Overseas Press Club of America, the judges, and all of those whose accounts and ordeals have contributed to the greater mission of holding to account the successive US administrations on whose behalf these atrocities were carried out.
Finishing reporting for a book related to this story, but his editor, Vanessa Garazi, will accept the award on his behalf. The Bob Considine Award, sponsored by Bill Holstein and Rita Savell, is for Best Newspaper, News Service, or Digital Interpretation of International Affairs. And the award goes to Mary Beth Sheridan and Kevin Seif of The Washington Post for their extraordinary stories under Losing Control, a story of the capture of Mexico's government by narco-traffickers, by uncovering the shocking truths of how pervasive corruption and violence has become in Mexico. The series epitomized great foreign correspondence. It tackled an important truth that authorities have worked hard to hide and showed the great bravery in reporting it. Online, it was beautifully presented. I recommend it all to you, with innovative design elements and graphics that enhanced the traditional journalistic elements. Let's watch.
We'd like to thank the Overseas Press Club for this extraordinary honor.
And we'd like to thank our editors at The Washington Post for their investment in this kind of ambitious foreign reporting.
Telling the story of Mexico's decomposition is extraordinarily challenging. Local journalists are silenced, government structures are infiltrated or sometimes totally ineffectual. We'd like to thank all the Mexican journalists, academics, officials, and citizens who helped us understand the reality. On a personal note, I'd like to offer a particular thanks to my parents, who've supported me through this project and so many others.
We hope with this series of stories we were able to introduce our readers not just to a country facing profound challenges, but also to people persevering, trying their best to make their country better and safer. They welcomed us into their homes and their villages, even though we got to leave and they didn't. I'd also like to thank my family for their support.
Now, the Robert Capa Gold Medal for Exceptional Courage and Enterprise is sponsored by Getty Images. And the award goes to Kiana Herreri of the New York Times Magazine for Where Prison is a Kind of Freedom. The Capa Award judges says Herreri's photos of women in Afghanistan's Herat prison exemplify her extraordinary courage and enterprise, not only to overcome barriers to access at personal risk, but to challenge the status quo in the visual portrayal of underrepresented communities. Herreri's work sets the highest standard for upholding the dignity of her subjects while modeling the power of photographic reportage. In an email to the OPC earlier this month, Herreri explained why she has difficulty crafting her remarks for the video you're about to see. Quote, "I'd become very close to one of the women from Herat prison and her 2 teenage daughters, and I've been working on getting them out, first out of Herat, then out of Kabul. It involved smuggling them out into Pakistan and many sleepless nights. I think overall, on top of everything else we went through in the last 3 months, I'm overly emotional about the Herat prison story. It made the writing of the text for my video quite difficult. Let's listen."
In 2019, I spent close to 2 weeks inside Herat's women's prison in northwest of Afghanistan, getting to know some of the 119 inmates. These brave women had seen no other way out of abuse and domestic violence but to kill their husbands. While their past lives were harrowing, their current lives were peaceful, happy, and free. Despite the overcrowding cells, many inmates felt freer in prison than they had in their marriages. The 15-foot wall that surrounds the prison and the barbed wire that encircles the walls give the compound a cage-like feeling. But the barriers were meant to keep intruders from getting in as much as they were intended to keep inmates from getting out. However, on August 13, 2 short days before Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan, a group of Taliban fighters opened the gates of Herat prison, releasing all the inmates with no question asked. For these women, the release wasn't liberating. The freedom they had experienced in jail is now taken away and replaced with more restrictions, fear, and uncertainty. Today, millions of Afghan women have been put away in this larger prison called Afghanistan. This is the consequence of an irresponsible withdrawal. I am incredibly humbled to have received the Robert Capa Gold Medal for this story. I would like to acknowledge the invaluable work of my colleague Hamed Sarfarazi, who secured my access to the prison. Hamed was forced to flee Afghanistan with his family after the fall, but he has now reached safety. I would also like to thank my editor, Amy Kerner, who has always been supportive and had my back, especially in the darkest days after the fall. Thank you.
Kiana could not be here, but to accept on her behalf is her editor, Amy Kerner. That's a pretty serious gold medal, by the way, that goes with that one. The Olivier Ribaud Award honors the best news photography from abroad in any medium. And the award goes to Nana Heitman of National Geographic for COVID Russia. Of course, one of the many challenges for photographers in 2020 was how to capture the seismic shifts all around us, the profound fear and loss that accompanied them. From a distance, with faces covered through layers of plastic and hazmat suits. But Heitman's stunning photographs documented the ravages and contradictions of the pandemic in Russia with a powerful but sensitive visual voice, pairing images of crowded churches with portraits of isolated elderly and mournful, surreal scenes of hospitals battling the virus. The gentle, intimate approach to the painful subject matter was a testament to the way that a light touch can produce a resounding impact.
Hello, my name is Nana Heitman. I'm a photographer and Magnum nominee currently based in Moscow in Russia. I'm really honored to receive the Olivier Ribaud Award for my work about the pandemic in Russia, which was published in National Geographic previously. I see my work as kind of a chronology of the first wave in Russia while documenting the ravages and contradictions of the sometimes surreal battle against the pandemic. During a year that was supposed to be the most important for the Russian president because it was ahead of his constitutional changes that grant Vladimir Putin power until 2036 now. I would like to thank the Russian editor Andrei Polikhanov and the wonderful brave Dr. Alexander Vonyukov for their trust and who granted me access to one of Moscow's biggest hospitals, COVID wards then. I think it happens rarely that a doctor anywhere in the world, especially in Russia, will say, I want that someone documents how things really are in our hospital at this current difficult time. And of course, a big thank you to Gal Fletcher and James Walford for being so wonderful and supportive on the way, for picking up my work and publishing a broader piece about the pandemic in Russia on that scale. Thank you.
Restrictions prevent Nana from coming to dinner tonight, but James Welford and Gail Fletcher from National Geographic will accept the award on her behalf. Number 5 is the award for Best Feature Photography on an international theme. And it goes to Cheryl Diaz-Meyer for Comfort Women on NPR, reported with support from the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting and Youngie Kim. The jury was immediately moved by Cheryl Diaz-Meyer's powerful and emotional work documenting the survivors of World War II sexual enslavement. She captured heartbreak, humanity, and healing in the expressions of this incredible community of survivors. This body of work is the perfect example of an impactful story amplified through caring and intentional eye of the photographer.
I'm Cheryl Diaz-Meyer, freelance photojournalist based in Washington, D.C. My project on the World War II sex slaves of the Philippines was produced with National Public Radio and with the generous support of the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting and the Young Hee Kim Grant. My heartfelt thanks to NPR's amazing visual team, Nicole Werbeck, Keith Jenkins, and Ben De La Cruz, to Manila Bureau Chief Julie McCarthy and producer Ella Maj, to the countless others at NPR who helped make this project a success, to the fixers and translators in the field. I want to thank my husband, Kenneth Manning, and my daughter, Isabel, for their eternal patience as I journeyed into the past to learn about the horrific history of my motherland. Their ongoing and consistent love and support gave me the fortitude to produce this work. The project could not have happened without the survivors and their families' courage. I am deeply humbled and grateful for their trust in allowing me to visually translate their stories.
Please welcome Cheryl to the stage.
Okay, now we will take a break. You can enjoy your meal, chat up the people at your table, and get out your phone and donate to the OPC's Fund for Afghan Journalists. That's an order. Do it now. Okay, enjoy. We'll be back. I'm back. I want to thank everyone who made a contribution to the OPC Fund for Afghan Journalists. They're rolling in, dozens and dozens, so thank you. You're very generous. Keep it up. This is our 82nd annual awards dinner, but with an asterisk. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic forced us to cancel our dinner last year. But that didn't mean canceling the commitment we all hold to the highest ideals of global journalism, of explaining the complex world to readers, viewers, and listeners, and of holding the powerful to account, all the while facing down the additional danger of a runaway virus, killing people by the tens of thousands every day. I'd like to take this moment to honor our 2020 winners who did all that, but were deprived of an in-person celebration. Their stories and how they overcame many challenges to get them live on at our website, opcofamerica.org. Would the class of 2020 award winners please rise, and I hope some of you are still here, and let's all give them a much belated round of applause. Well done. Now I'd like to turn it back over to John Avlon.
All right. Now, up next is the Lowell Thomas Award, who was really one of those old school OPC foreign correspondents. And this award is given for Best Radio, Audio, or Podcast, and is sponsored by Deborah Amos. And the award goes to Maria Honosa, Julieta Martinelli, Fernanda Camarena, Benjamin Alfaro, and Marlon Bishop of Latino USA with support from the Pulitzer Center. Their series, Moving the Border, captures how U.S. border policies have had a terrifying and lethal impact on asylum seekers and migrants alike, and how Mexico has now militarized its own southern border, blocking the free movement of people from Central America. They tell human stories and connect policy dots to show how the Mexican government has its own harsh new stance that criminalizes the quest for safe havens across the Americas and exposes the continent's most vulnerable people to unprecedented dangers.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for this extraordinary recognition from the Overseas Press Club for the Lowell Thomas Award for International Reporting and for the recognition of our work with Moving Borders. I want to say thank you to everybody who was a part of this production, which really came out of a moment of me just saying I have to go to the border as a journalist who's been covering immigration for the entirety of my career, and we needed to get there as soon as possible. And so in January of 2020, before the shutdown, that's where we were, both in the northern Mexican border and the southern Mexican border, to understand how Mexico has become the wall and how Mexico's own politics are forcing the wall. It was a very dramatic story for me personally to witness, and I just want to say thank you to my team, to Diane Sylvester, to Fernanda Camarena, to Julieta Martinelli, to Marlon Bishop, to Benjamin Alfaro, to the Pulitzer Center, as well as to the Ford Foundation. Thank you so much for believing in the work that we do. My entire team is so honored to receive this award from the Overseas Press Club. And so thank you so much, and we really appreciate it from the entire team at Futuro Media. Muchas, muchas, muchas gracias.
Please welcome Maria and Julieta. Love it. The David Kaplan Award for Best TV or Video Spot in News is sponsored by ABC News. And the winner is David Culver of CNN for coronavirus outbreak in China. David Culver and his producer Yang Chang were first on the scene in Wuhan, China at the outset of the coronavirus pandemic, scoring the only interview of the Chinese whistleblower Dr. Li Wenliang, who died of the disease. And then they braved the government lockdown to get the story out to the world.
Hey there, I'm David Culver with CNN, currently in Shanghai. Receiving this award is both humbling and comforting, and it makes being so far from family and friends a bit more palatable. It must be stressed, though, our work in Wuhan, hours before the lockdown and subsequent reporting from quarantine in Beijing and here in Shanghai, would not have been possible without the tireless hours put in by my CNN team, particularly producer Yong Chong and photojournalist Natalie Thomas. It is thanks to their efforts and determination that we were able to share with the world a glimpse of what was then a mysterious illness on the brink of becoming this historic pandemic. Thank you so much for this award. It really means a lot.
David cannot be with us tonight because if he leaves China, he may not get permission to re-enter the country. But those videos really are a great addition. And since I have the honor of working at CNN, I will accept on his behalf and make sure David gets his certificate. The Edward R. Murrow Award, sponsored by CBS News, is for Best Documentary Under 30 Minutes. And the award goes to Isabel Keong, Jackie Jesko, and Amir Khan for India Burning on Vice on Showtime. By venturing deep into remote communities, the Vice team exposed the disconnect between millions of Muslim Indians at risk of losing their citizenship and the denials of top officials. They captured this underreported story with humanity and clarity in just 15 minutes. And the film portrays characters pitted against a bureaucracy with the power to unravel their lives. Dogged investigative reporting and probing interviews result in a work of real impact that is still reverberating in India today.
My name's Isabel Young, I'm from Vice News, and we are just incredibly honoured to be receiving this award today from the Overseas Press Club. Our work highlights the fact that 200 million or so Indian Muslims are having their rights rolled back. And I'd like to acknowledge and thank everyone who's worked on this, which is a massive, massive team effort from the people at HQ, which is Subrata, Craig and Bev, as well as everyone else, and the team in the field, which is Angad, Jackie, Zach, Amma, and actually a lot of local journalists who can't be named for security reasons, but really did put everything into making this story a reality.
Isabel is in Afghanistan and says she's watching the live stream, so congratulations. Amir Khan is unable to get a visa to leave India, and so we will get this certificate to their colleagues at Vice, and they will get in their hands. Congratulations. The Peter Jennings Award is for Best Long-Form Documentary and is sponsored by the Jennings family. The winners are James Blumell and Joe Abel for Once Upon a Time in Iraq on Frontline. This searing documentary is narrated exclusively. I'll just say, everyone here does great work, but you guys do exceptional work. Thank you. The ordinary Iraqis narrate this documentary. People who survived the tumultuous history unleashed after the fall and execution of Saddam Hussein. And in intimate interviews, these men and women shared the brief joy, then the long disillusionment, grief, and terror they experienced as their country moved from the Saddam era through periods of street warfare, sectarian violence, and the ruthless occupation of ISIS. Countless stories have reported those details, but often with a focus on the actions and policies of others, particularly the United States. But the producers of this film have shown us how little we understood of how Iraqis experienced the impact of those policies. And in telling us how they endured, these Iraqis have brought new depth of understanding to America's legacy in their country and its future.
Hi, it's a great honor to win this award. Like everyone else, I think I thought I understood the story of the Iraq War. But when I started making this film and hearing the stories directly from the Iraqis that lived through it, I realized I actually understood very little. And I hope this film has sort of shed new light on those experiences. I'd like to start by thanking Keynote Films and the team at PBS Frontline, especially Rainey and Andrew. I'd also like to thank Joe Abel, our producer, and the fantastic team that helped me make this. Each one brought something really unique and special to it. But most of all, I suppose I'd like to thank the contributors that shared their stories with me, and without whom there really wouldn't be any film to watch. So, thanks.
James and Joe were unable to come from London due to COVID restrictions, but accepting the certificate on their behalf is Rainey Aronson-Roth, the executive producer of Frontline. The Ed Cunningham Magazine Award is sponsored by Michael S. Serrell, and the winner is Sarah Topol for her piece, Her Uyghur Parents Were Model Chinese Citizens. It Didn't Matter, published in the New York Times Magazine. With intimate and meticulous reporting and elegant prose, Topol creates a haunting depiction of a family tragedy, shedding light on the still too little understood plight of China's Uyghurs.
My name is Sarah Topol, and I'm a writer at large for the New York Times Magazine. Thank you so much to the Overseas Press Club and the jury for this award. It is the greatest honor to be recognized by your peers. There are so many people who made this work possible, starting with the journalists who had been doing phenomenal reporting on this topic long before I came to it, as well as the academics and experts who were so kind with their time and analysis. The piece itself would not have been possible without the brilliant edits of Mike Benoit and Charlie Honans, as well as the support of the entire staff of the New York Times Magazine, who worked tirelessly on these ambitious projects. I would like to thank all the Uyghurs and Kazakh Muslims who speak to the press at great personal risk. Without their testimony, we would not know the extent of the cultural genocide taking place in Xinjiang today. I would especially like to thank Humar and Zumrat Isaac, who allowed me into their homes and their lives and their confidence, and who had so much patience with my questions on such difficult subjects. Their bravery overwhelmed me, and it is the reason we're being honored with this award today. Finally, I would like to thank our mothers, Emma and Zohre, whose strength inspired us to be who we are today.
Please welcome and congratulate Sarah. And now we move on to the Best Cartoon Award, which is always a highlight of the program. And the award is sponsored by Daimler. The winner is Kevin Collar, known as Cal, who draws for The Economist, The Baltimore Sun, and Counterpoint. I'm sure you recognize his work. The judges said Cal seems like a cartoonist transported from a bygone era while still creating compelling work that resonates with today's audience. His impeccable pen and ink drawings and bobblehead caricatures might look at home on newspaper editorial pages of a century ago, which was fitting because that was the last time we saw the global pandemic on the scale of COVID. With his quill aimed like a syringe at China, Putin, climate change, and deadly conspiracies, Cal's incisive commentary serves as the perfect shot in the arm for today's pandemic-weary world.
Hi, I'm Kevin Cal Callagher. I'm the editorial cartoonist for The Economist magazine of London and for Counterpoint, an online newsletter. I'd like to thank the editors and staff at The Economist for tolerating a cheeky, Yankee cartoonist in their midst for 43 years, and the folks at Counterpoint for plotting a new way forward for editorial cartoons on the web via a free and subscription newsletter. I'd also like to thank my wife for something perhaps even more difficult, and that's tolerating me throughout 2020 as I churned out cartoons in close quarters during the COVID lockdown. I'm also extremely grateful as a cartoonist for all the cartoonish politicians around the globe who've made my job so easy during my career. We have past US presidents like Barack Obama and vice presidents like Dick Cheney. We have the current president, Joe Biden. And we have someone who thinks he's president, or maybe something else. We also have cartoon villains from abroad that need to be recognized, like the Kims of North Korea and Vladimir Putin of Russia, who here, when asked by Germany's Angela Merkel to stop meddling in foreign elections, he declares, "You have my word." But then his guards behind him say, and his word is "niet." But the star villain of 2020 was the coronavirus. And fortunately for cartoonists, the telltale round spiked COVID-19 molecule made a perfect drawing device. It was a tennis ball in the middle of a blame game between US and China. It could be a bowling ball to punish non-compliant citizens, or a baseball to show Trump's incapacity to hit the growing threat, or a soccer ball to show Brazil's Bolsonaro inability to kick the problem from his country. Or it could be a shot put in the Tokyo Olympic Games. But its most important sports metaphor has to be as a tune-up for the world's next fight with global warming. I have one last point of gratitude. In January 2020 marked the 5th anniversary of the bloody attack on Charlie Hebdo. In the memory of that attack on free speech, I am grateful that I live and work in a society that embraces freedom of expression. And I am grateful to be joined in the journalistic trenches with colleagues like you who will fight for truth and against intolerance. Thank you so much.
And here is the legendary Cal. And now it's my honor and my pleasure to introduce tonight's keynote speaker, Maggie Haberman of the New York Times. You all know her work, her awards, which helped define the Trump era and really our entire political era, the constant scoopage that reminded us how much is on the line, how much we are trying to defend as journalists democracy here at home and abroad. What you might not fully appreciate is how much affection and respect her colleagues and her peers have for her. It is my great honor and privilege to introduce Maggie Haberman.
Thank you so much for the honor of having me give this address tonight. I want to thank the Overseas Press Club for this event, for the work you do to keep people informed about what's happening around the globe. As someone who reports primarily on domestic matters, I am in awe of the work all of you do. I just want to take a moment to say the last time I was in this room was 3 years ago for an event honoring my father-in-law who died earlier this year. There was no greater appreciator of the work of journalists than him. We have been for several years in a fraught moment, both for journalism and for democracy, a perfect storm of collision between rising authoritarianism and diminished understanding of why the news media exists. I grew up immersed in the world of foreign correspondence. My father spent 13 years overseas for the New York Times, first in Tokyo, then in Italy, and then in Israel. He covered pro-democracy uprisings, explaining to me that cinematic characters who play foreign correspondents, like Mel Gibson in The Year of Living Dangerously, in which the reporter flees the danger instead of staying behind for the story, were not realistic. No reporter would ever leave the story, he explained. And I had the honor of being a White House correspondent for the New York Times during a unique and tumultuous period in our country's history. My colleagues and I were routinely attacked as the enemy of the people by a president who had neither the understanding of nor interest in the significance of why we do what we do. He spent the entirety of his term treating the press as if it existed to serve as a publicity arm of his government. In an interview with my colleague Peter Baker and our publisher A.G. Sulzberger and myself, Trump made clear that he had never given thought to the role the press plays in the constitutional democracy. I asked him during this interview, as he complained about the media, what he understood us to do, what he thought our role was. And he replied that our role is to cover events accurately and fairly. That is our goal, always, but not our function. Trump rejected coverage of corruption within his government and about how he blurred the lines between the Trump administration and his family business, of his comments on and policies regarding race and immigration, and of his administration's mishandling of the coronavirus pandemic. I could talk about how taxing the last 5 years were on journalists in this country covering Washington, at a time when local news outlets are either closing or being bought and gutted by financiers who do not have a journalism background. I could talk about how journalists covering their government in the U.S. have been demeaned by a public that increasingly gets its news from outlets that agree with their pre-existing mindsets. And yet we are so fortunate to have the protections of a free press that we have in this country. While Trump's approach to the press was dangerous, it was perhaps most consequential for colleagues overseas working in countries where dictators and despots use the words of a U.S. president to justify their own crackdowns on the press. In 2016, there were 272 journalists imprisoned worldwide for their work. In 2020, the number was 274. And yet, 2021 had remarkable moments for journalism overseas and for the coverage of events elsewhere. Just this month, Maria Ressa, the fearless Philippine journalist reporting on the Philippine president's regime, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her work. She was co-awarded with the Russian journalist Dmitry Muratov. 2 months ago, there was remarkable coverage of the aftermath and fallout of President Biden's decision to pull the U.S. out of Afghanistan after a so-called forever war that left thousands dead and cost trillions of dollars. Without Clarissa Ward at CNN showing images of the calamitous evacuations, the world would have been less educated. That's also the case with my remarkable colleague, Thomas Gibbons Neff, or TM, as those of us who knew him in DC refer to him. A former soldier himself who was earlier this year relocated to the Times' Afghanistan Bureau, TM was able to get out of Afghanistan this summer, but like that prototypical foreign correspondent my father once described, TM secretly returned to help evacuate colleagues, sending guidance about how to arrive at the airport safely for departure. His was a heroic act during a desperate several days on the ground in Afghanistan. Shortly after that, my colleagues at the Times exposed the actual facts of a drone strike in Afghanistan following the chaotic withdrawal, one which military leaders called righteous, but which killed several civilians, including children. Without their reporting, the public may never have known the truth. I talked before about the danger of Trump's words. It was his actions in his final days in office that have been the focus of some of the most alarming reporting over the last 9 months. Some of this we knew in real time. I reported on a weekend in December 2020 about Trump meeting with his former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn and others in the Oval Office as Flynn pitched him on quote-unquote rerunning the election, a plan that would have relied on government seizing the voting machines. We've learned more about that meeting since, as well as other means Trump was discussing to undo the results of a free and fair election and to maintain power. And we all watched in real time on January 6th as hundreds of his supporters stormed the seat of the federal legislature and tried to stop the certification of the 2020 election. During that riot, some of his supporters treated journalists as their targets. The Trump era was unique in that there was a president so willing to undermine a free press with the power of his position. But as an industry, we must also be careful not to treat threats to press freedoms as unique to one specific leader or official. These threats do not all take the same form, and they are not all equal, but they still exist in this country. To that end, I want to say how fortunate my colleagues and I are to work with David McCraw, our newsroom's top lawyer and also our fiercest advocate. As scary a time as this has been in so many ways, the stellar journalism that has emerged from it underscores not just why what we do is vital, but why the frequent criticism of how we do what we do has often lapsed into caricature. We are not a perfect industry, and none of us is perfect at the craft, but I believe we aim for good and get it right most of the time. Journalists and journalism are vital. All of our work is vital, and I am so honored to have been asked to speak. Thank you, and enjoy the souffle.
Another round of applause for Maggie. All right, let's get back to the awards and a little bit of dessert, I believe. The Morton Frank Award is for the best international business news reporting in TV, video, radio, audio, or podcast, and it's sponsored by Mark Lemke. The winners are Monty Reel and Topher Forces of Bloomberg Green for their 7-part audio series, Blood River. This is an extraordinary podcast. I've listened to it myself, and through dramatic storytelling and deep reporting into the murder of an environmental activist in Honduras, Bloomberg Green reveals how corrupt corporate and government forces will do anything to get international development project launched in that country.
Hi, this is Monty Reel of Bloomberg News. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and Topher Forces, who is the producer of Blood River. This was a podcast that we worked on for more than a year in Honduras and elsewhere. And as is the case of any project of that size, there are a lot of people who helped make it happen. And so we just wanted to acknowledge some of them. They include Francesca Levy, Katie Boyce, Jed Sandberg, Aaron Rutkoff, Bob Blau, Flynn McRoberts, Randy Shapiro, and also Carlos Rodriguez, who helped create a Spanish language version of the podcast. In Honduras, we interviewed dozens of people, and we especially want to thank them. This podcast is about murder, it's about business interests, and the justice system, which can be very sensitive subjects in Honduras, and we just wanted to acknowledge them and thank them for their willingness to speak to us about it. And of course, we want to thank the OPC. It's a wonderful honor, and Topher and I are very grateful to receive it. Thank you.
Monty and Topher, please come up. Now, the Malcolm Forbes Award for Best International Business News Reporting in Print or Digital, sponsored by Forbes magazine, goes to Dan McCrum, Paul Murphy, Sam Jones, and Olaf Storbeck of the Financial Times for Inside Wirecard. This is the remarkable multi-year takedown of a European fintech high-flyer Wirecard by Financial Times investigation team that culminated in 2020 with stories detailing the rot not only at the DAX 30 firm, but in the German financial establishment that sought to protect it. Dan McCrum laid out for readers the campaign by Wirecard and its hired guns to discredit and even prosecute him for unearthing the scandalous accounting actions, which earlier prompted the FT to suspend its own efforts while it completed an internal probe. That's sinister stuff. The work resumed with stories on the shady leaders of Wirecard and on the Big Four accounting firm, Ernst & Young, whose professionals were complicit in the fraud. From this courageous and resourceful journalism has created arrest warrants, resignations, and a gaping insolvency.
I mean, to begin with, it was hard to believe. You have a sense of the Financial Times as a reputed organization, and you're very publicly being called a criminal. I was sort of used to it when the company had done it, because the company had done it for years. But when you suddenly find yourself facing an actual criminal investigation in Germany with regulators where the company which you're writing about seems to have certainly the ear of these people, there were some moments where that was quite stressful. You do at times start to think that you're going a little bit mad, because obviously you become paranoid if you constantly think your emails are going to be hacked, or if you think people are following you. There was a period where I started to double back when I was going to meet people, or you would get on a tube carriage and jump off again, which seems ridiculous, and it seemed ridiculous at the time. We were very conscious that there was active surveillance going on, so you start to doubt yourself. And when you try and explain this to anyone as well, like, yes, I'm trying to report on the company and all this crazy stuff is happening, even now I think about it, it sounds ridiculous, like some sort of film.
Great video. Sam Jones will be accepting the award for the team. That really is a business story that's half a spy film. It's unbelievable. All right. The Cornelius Ryan Book Award is sponsored by the Friends of Richard Threkild. And the award goes to Declan Walsh for The 9 Lives of Pakistan, Dispatches from a Precarious State, published by W.W. Norton and Company. The judges said Walsh's deep knowledge of Pakistan, lively writing, historical and intellectual asides, along with his personal commitment to the story, gives the book the weight of truth. His portrait of the Karachi police chief, who will use any measure, no matter how brutal or corrupt, to police his beat, shows how Pakistan's force of order control or fail to control that country. Each of his other portraits of Pakistani figures bring into focus still another aspect of the way things keep falling apart in a critically situated, nuclear-armed regional power.
My name is Declan Walsh. I'm a reporter with the New York Times and the author of The 9 Lives of Pakistan. In writing this book, I sought to tell the story of a particularly dramatic period in Pakistan's recent history, but also to illuminate some of the enduring truths about this country that so fascinated and frustrated me for over a decade. And I think that the seismic recent changes in Afghanistan only underscore the importance of understanding this part of the world. As anyone who's visited there will tell you, Pakistan is also a place of great generosity. And if I owe thanks to anyone, it's to the many Pakistanis who opened their doors to me, shared their stories, and sometimes spilled out their hearts. But in particular, I would also like to thank a few people who helped to shape this book and get it over the line. Tom Mayer at W.W. Norton, my agents Carolina Sutton in London and Sloan Harris in New York, the editors who supported my work at the New York Times, and in particular to my friends Madiha Sattar, Sarah Lyle, and Faiza Sultan Khan. Thank you.
And Declan is here to accept his award. The Madeline Dane Ross Award, sponsored by Linda Fasullo, is for Best International Reporting in Print or Digital showing a concern for the human condition. And the winner is Danielle Paquette of the Washington Post for her series Life in West Africa. The jury said this series is remarkable for its breadth of time and place, showing how powerful forces from colonialism to social media shape lives throughout West Africa. She is also remarkably prolific. Each story is exquisitely told through ordinary people confronting these forces. Rubber plantation workers in Liberia, a teenage dancer from Mali, the standout tale of a Black American who moves to Ghana to flee racism. It's all a reminder that overseas reporting can serve both as a window and a mirror.
Hello, my name is Danielle Paquette, and I'm the West Africa Bureau Chief for the Washington Post. These stories all started with a number. The number of layoffs at the Firestone rubber plantation in Liberia, the number of African Americans who were deciding to move to Ghana, the number of West African soldiers who were killed by French troops in a 1944 massacre, and the number of those uprooted by violence in Burkina Faso. I wanted to get to know the people behind these numbers, and getting there was the hardest part. Their stories spanned 4 countries and 1 bright red do not travel zone. But once we met, talking came easy. We all want the same things: love, security, and respect. I want to thank the entire Washington Post foreign team, especially my editor, Jenna Moore, and news assistant, Boris Otal, for supporting this effort. A special shout out to my husband, Scott Garfing, for moving to Dakar during a pandemic and proofreading every draft.
Congratulations to Danielle. The David A. Andelman and Pamela Title Award, sponsored by David and Pamela, is for Best International Reporting in the Broadcast Media showing a concern for the human condition. And the award goes to the Wall Street Journal staff and Gimlet Media for Vale Ignored Warnings. In 2019, a dam owned by the Brazil-based Vale SA collapsed near the Brazilian town of Brumadinho, releasing 3 billion gallons of mud and mining waste and leveling buildings, homes, and farms. The disaster killed 270 people. And in its aftermath, the Wall Street Journal reporters investigated the dam's failure. Even as Vale denied fault, the Journal found that they had ignored warnings about the dam's stability and uncovered a conflict of interest in how the company conducted inspections and audits. 1 year after the collapse, reporters Samantha Pearson and Lucinda Magalhães narrated an episode of the Journal podcast that told the story of the dam, its vulnerabilities, and the double-edged swords of Vale's compensatory payments to the poor victims of the disaster. Ultimately, the Journal's work helped pave the way for regulatory changes in Brazil, strengthened industry guidelines worldwide, and gave voice to countless people whose lives were upended by the collapse.
Hi, I'm Pia Gadkari, producer on the Journal podcast, which is a production between Gimlet and the Wall Street Journal. Our episode is about a mining disaster that took place in Brazil in 2019 and killed over 250 people. the Wall Street Journal spent a year investigating the incident and the company that owned the mine, because this wasn't the first time there had been a disaster at one of their facilities. Many people contributed to this episode. First, I'd like to mention Samantha Pearson and Luciana Magajes, the reporters in Brazil who led the investigation, and their editor, David Lunau, as well as many other reporters and editors at the Wall Street Journal. Then there's the podcast team, including co-host Ryan Knutson, editor Jorge Just, engineer Griffin Tanner, and Gerard Cole, Kate Leinbaugh, Annie Rose Strasser, Nazanin Rafsanjani, and the whole staff at the Journal podcast. Finally, I'd like to recognize the survivors and the victims' families in Brumadinho. This award is dedicated to them. Thank you.
And accepting the award are Pia Gadkari, Ryan Knutson, and Griffin Tanner. The Joe and Lori Dine Award for Best International Reporting in any medium dealing with human rights is sponsored by Philip Dine. And the award goes to Marjorie Mason and Robin McDowell of the Associated Press for Fruits of Labor. Mason and McDowell tell a powerful story of exploitation, slavery, human trafficking, sexual harassment, and greed in the making of palm oil, a ubiquitous ingredient which Americans consume daily. Their detailed and often risky reporting connected the chilling abuses on the palm oil plantations directly to the reader and explained why the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil stamp of approval is not nearly enough. These labels can be misleading to consumers who then believe the product is free from unsustainable and inhumane practices.
Hi, I'm Margie Mason. The Fruits of Labor project took more than 2 years to report. It involved painstaking field reporting, but also a lot of risk on the part of the more than 130 men, women, and children who spoke to us. If caught, they risk being fired, deported, sent to immigration detention centers, or even physical harm, such as beatings. Because of this, in most cases, we opted not to use the names or faces of the people we spoke to in order to protect them from potential repercussions.
I'm Robin McDowell. Margie Mason and I spent most of our careers working in Southeast Asia for the Associated Press. A lot had been written about the devastating effects the $65 billion palm oil industry had had on the environment. But what about the millions of workers? Even we were surprised by the level of abuse, finding everything from slavery and child labor to rape in the fields. By tracing their product back to Dove soap, Girl Scout cookies, and other iconic U.S. brands, we hoped the workers' voices would finally be heard.
Congratulations, Margie and Robin. And now, it's my pleasure to invite Paula back to the stage to present the President's Award.
Each year, the OPC president has the honor of choosing one person who exemplifies the principles the club stands for, an unflagging commitment to the highest ideals of journalism and storytelling, staunch support for and mentoring of the next generation of journalists, and bravery and fortitude in telling the most difficult stories. I could not think of a more deserving person than the late Christopher Dickey, a long time and much cherished OPC board member who we lost suddenly in July 2020 at the age of 68. Many of you knew Chris far better than me. He was the Paris-based World News editor for the Daily Beast. He was a foreign correspondent for the Washington Post and Newsweek in Mexico, Central America, the Middle East, Africa, and the Balkans. He wrote 7 books, including a memoir, Summer of Deliverance, about his relationship with his father, the poet and novelist James Dickey. But more than any of that, he was a gifted storyteller, photographer, Renaissance man, and bon vivant. The OPC has tried to honor his memory and legacy with several events. One, in conjunction with Photoville, is a banner showing some of his photographs and his life story. It's on display at Brooklyn Bridge Park here in New York until December 1, and I encourage you to go and take a look. We held an online panel discussion featuring former colleagues and editors. And so we wanted to do this one last bit and thank him for everything that he left us by giving him the President's Award posthumously. The consensus among those who knew him well or just briefly is that he was one of a kind. We miss him greatly. Please watch this short video about Chris, compliments of NBC.
We received some horrible and sad news today about an American in Paris, our man in Paris, in fact. Christopher Dickey was a friend of ours. He was a frequent guest of ours here, often from his perch high above the Champs-Élysées with the Arc de Triomphe in the background. Always live, which meant getting up insanely early just to talk with us and our audience was always richer for the experience and his knowledge. Chris Dickey was the real deal, you see, a journalist in full. One of those great and curious storytellers who seemed to know just about everything and everyone. He covered, by my count, every war there was over the last couple of decades, from Central America to Africa and the Balkans to the Persian Gulf. He started at the Washington Post, later was Paris editor at, as we now call it, the old Newsweek. He cared way more about journalism than Newsweek's owners, and after its 3rd sale, he became world news editor at the Daily Beast, mentoring a ton of writers along the way. He was a clear-eyed patriot. As he saw it, love of country meant holding us to account, all of us. And we found him in a melancholy mood when he last appeared here back in May, watching the news from home in his Paris apartment, which that day included armed pro-Trump protesters storming the Michigan State House.
Well, I think images like that crystallize exactly what Europeans think about the worst of America, the worst craziness of America, the white supremacy, the guns, all of that. But we're talking about a relatively small number of people there. The bigger problem is that the United States has essentially abdicated leadership at the moment of the greatest global crisis in living memory. And that is a real problem. This is a kind of situation where you would have expected the U.S. to take the lead, to be out in front, to be doing things better than anybody else. Even a few months ago, pandemic studies showed that the U.S. was the best prepared country in the world. But in fact, we've shown no leadership in the United States. It's a disastrous situation. We are leading the world in deaths from this disease, and we'll have tens of thousands more before this is over.
That was from May 1st, and sadly, for the record, sadly for all of us, he was right. Christopher Dickey was the son of the legendary Southern writer James Dickey, former poet laureate of the United States. James Dickey wrote the novel Deliverance. He had a bit part as the sheriff in the movie. When the photo was taken with his incredibly cool son, Chris, on the right, looking for all the world like period Bob Dylan, Chris wrote a great book called Summer of Deliverance about that summer with his very complicated father, one of 7 books that Chris Dickey authored. He had the best words. He also took and posted a ton of photos, like the sidewalk at 30 Rock, where there were still people there last fall before an appearance on the air with us, and the sidewalk in Paris, posted just hours before he died. Our friend, the talented Mr. Dickey, was 68 years old when he died of heart failure in Paris. We want to express our condolences to his family. We urge all of you to read what he wrote and left behind for all of us.
Chris's son James is here to receive the President's Award Certificate on behalf of his father and his family. Welcome, James.
So thank you very much to the OPC for recognizing my father's lifetime of dedication to being a foreign correspondent. I'm going to share with you very briefly one of his favorite stories that I think absolutely highlights what it means to be a journalist. In the early 1980s, in his first assignment as the Washington Post bureau chief to Mexico City, covering Central America at a highly controversial time, he sat down with the ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to El Salvador. And the U.S. ambassador started to tell him about all of the things that were wrong with U.S. policy towards El Salvador, about how this wasn't working and these policies weren't working out, and how these personalities were interfering with their ability to get the job done in terms of forwarding U.S. policy in the region. And my father actually stopped him and said, "Wait. Why are you telling me this?" And the ambassador said, "I write this in a cable. I send it off to Washington. It goes onto the desk for an undersecretary, and it will never be seen again. I tell you, and it goes on the front page of the Washington Post. And action happens." And that, among many other reasons, is why my father did what he did, and why he was so happy to be part of this organization and to help mentor the next generation and hopefully the generation after that of journalists who will continue to go around the world telling the truth as they see it so that the world will make better decisions. Thank you very much.
And I'll just add to that, say that I'm one of many journalists who loved Chris Dickey, and his generosity of spirit and his expertise and his life well lived was an inspiration to all of us, and he is deeply missed. The Whitman Basso Environment Award is sponsored by Robert Serio. The winners are Abram Lustgarten and Meredith Kohut for Refugees from the Earth, published by the New York Times Magazine and ProPublica, with support from the Pulitzer Center. Lustgarten also won the Basso Award in 2019. For this sweeping series about climate migration, Lustgarten spent 2 years reporting in places as far-flung as Guatemala and eastern Russia. It is a rich tapestry of individual voices, computer modeling, and essay writing, including a meditation on whether it's time to flee from fires engulfing his home in Northern California. We meet Jorge A., a Guatemalan farmer driven by drought to cross the border into the United States, a Chinese man named Dima who moves north into Russia to grow soybeans. The writing is spellbinding, the scope ambitious, and the result, frankly, scary, as Lustgarten contemplates a not-too-distant future in which 1/5 the world's surface area will be uninhabitable and tens of millions of people are forced to leave their homes. Kohut's photography brings into sharp focus the people and the ways in which a climate change is driving their movements.
I'm Abram Lustgarten, and I report on climate change for ProPublica and the New York Times Magazine. It's an extraordinary honor to be recognized here for this work today, and I want to thank the Overseas Press Club for supporting it. So often, we talk about how the climate crisis is changing the physical world around us, but not necessarily how it changes the way people live. Global data suggests that up to 3 billion people will soon find themselves living in regions that no longer offer optimum conditions for human life. This project aimed to explore how people will respond to that crisis, when they will move, and where they will go.
Hi, I'm Meredith Kohut, and I'd like to express my deepest gratitude to the more than 300 people who helped me photograph this series, especially the farmers in Alta Verapaz, Guatemala, and all the migrants as they journeyed northward. As a photojournalist, I feel that what makes photographs compelling are the people in them, not the people who take them. So I'd like to share this honor with all the people who so selflessly shared their stories and their struggles so they could help us all better understand the plight of the millions of people who have been displaced by climate change.
I also need to thank the Pulitzer Center for its support of our reporting, as well as my editors who are unflinchingly committed to this project, Luke Mitchell and Jake Silverstein at The Times and Joe Sexton at ProPublica, as well as ProPublica data reporting wizard Al Shaw and my academic partner at Baruch College, who built our model to analyze future global migration flows, Brian Jones.
Thank you also to my stellar field team, especially Ruben Figueroa and Pedro Pablo Solares, to the photo and design teams at the New York Times Magazine and ProPublica, especially my incredibly supportive photo editors, Kristen Geisler and Stacey Baker, and the utterly brilliant director of photography, Kathy Ryan. Thank you also to the creative director, Gail Vichler, and the talented designers, Matt Curtis, Ben Gangettet, and Kate LaRue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Abram could not join us tonight, but his editor, Luke Mitchell, will accept the award along with Meredith. The Robert Spears Benjamin Award for reporting on Latin America is sponsored by Paula Dwyer. The winners are Kate Morrissey, Lauren Schroeder, Nelvin Cepeda, and Alejandro Tamayo of the San Diego Union Tribune for Returned. This whip-smart series offers a fresh, reader-friendly exploration by a regional newspaper working in its own backyard into what really happens to those seeking the promise of asylum at America's doorstep. The stories focus not on economic migrants, but those fleeing political violence back home, specifically paramilitaries in Daniel Ortega's Nicaragua, who were stranded in Tijuana. We know the immigration asylum courts were overwhelmed in 2020, but reporter Kate Morrissey and her colleagues showed with deep data dives and shoe leather reporting in courtrooms how capricious and unjust the system can be.
On behalf of the entire Return Project team, I want to say thank you to the Overseas Press Club for this award. It means the world to us. Nell, Alejandro, Lauren, and I worked so hard to put this series together under the direction of editor Christina Davis, and we had a lot of help from across the newsroom at the San Diego Union Tribune. Ruby Gaviola programmed the interactive features that you see in Part 2, Michelle Guerrero did the beautiful illustrations throughout the series, and Michelle Gilchrist did the print graphics. I also want to recognize the design team that laid out the print and online packages so beautifully. And congratulations as well to managing editor Laura Cicalo, whose mighty, mighty team at the copy desk read not only all of the articles in this series, but also hundreds of biographies for immigration judges, which ended up in the interactive feature. And a big thank you to Jeff Light, the editor and publisher of our paper, who believed in this project from its beginning and believed in me enough to send me to Nicaragua and Honduras. As a local reporter, that's not something I thought I would be doing. But the story of the US asylum system, despite its national and international significance, was a story that was happening in our backyard at the San Diego-Tijuana border. I'm so proud of us as a team for rising to meet the slew of challenges that we faced in making return to reality. Congratulations to everyone involved.
And all 5 winners flew from San Diego to accept their award. Come on up. Just another reminder of how vital local journalism really is. The Kim Wall Award for Creative Digital Storytelling goes to Megha Rajapalan, Allison Killing, and Christo Buchek of BuzzFeed News, with support from the Pulitzer Center for Built to Last. Now, over the last few years, China has built hundreds of high-security internment camps to incarcerate Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and other Muslim minorities, while publicly denying the existence of such detention facilities. In an area blacked out on Baidu, the Chinese equivalent of Google Maps, BuzzFeed's use of satellite images proved the existence of more detention facilities than previously known. BuzzFeed's reporting was notable for its combination of hard-to-source interviews with innovative use of satellite imagery and 3D visualization. The result was a powerful project that showed conclusively that China is operating a massive and industrialized internment system.
Hi, I'm Megha Rajagopalan, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself as well as Allison Killing, who's an architect, an investigator, and a geospatial analyst, and Christo Buchek, who's a programmer. Last year, the 3 of us worked to put together a series that documented the scope and scale of China's mass internment and detention programs in the Xinjiang region. We're so grateful to all of the people and organizations that made this ambitious and kind of unusual project possible, especially all the staff of BuzzFeed News and our editor, Alex Campbell, as well as the Eybeam Center for the Future of Journalism, the Pulitzer Center, and the Open Technology Fund. Most of all, we're really grateful to the former detainees and prisoners that spoke with us, often at great risk to themselves and their families, in order to share their experiences of what happened to them inside China's camps.
Now, none of the group could make it here tonight because of COVID restrictions or work travel, but accepting for them is John Sawyer of the Pulitzer Center. The Roy Rowan Award for Best Investigative Reporting is sponsored by his son Marcus, and the winners are Dake Kong and the staff of the Associated Press for China Cracks Down. The AP disclosed how specific actions by China all but assured the spread of COVID around the world and inflicted draconian human rights abuses on the nation's Uyghur minority. Led by AP Beijing reporter Dake Kong, who several years ago won a scholarship from the OPC Foundation, the series revealed that for 6 days, China's leaders held off alerting the public as to the great danger posed by the virus, setting the stage for its global spread. The AP team obtained thousands of pages of internal Chinese government documents and conducted hundreds of interviews at great personal risk in Wuhan at the height of the epidemic and often at night, using encrypted messages and multiple phones to avoid detection by the Chinese police.
My name is Dake Kang. I'm a reporter for the Associated Press in Beijing. It's a real honor for me and my colleagues to win the Roy Rowan Award for Investigative Reporting. I still vividly recall the first uncertain days of the outbreak in Wuhan. My colleagues and I had left the city less than 24 hours before authorities sealed it off from the rest of the world. As the virus ripped through China and began spreading around the world, one question above all was key. How did this all begin? It swiftly became one of the most sensitive topics in the country, along with the ongoing crackdown in Xinjiang in far west China. But despite these hyper-polarized times we live in, there are still many who value the truth and who are brave enough to speak to us despite the risks. I'd like to thank my editor, Mary Rajkumar, whose clear-headed guidance transformed our complicated reporting into clear, crisp prose, and also especially my Chinese colleagues, who continue to work day in and out despite increasing pressure to report the facts and reveal the truth. Thank you very much.
Now, Dave could not be here tonight, but his parents are in the audience. And accepting his certificate are his colleagues, Mary Rajkumar and Maria Cheng. That's got to feel great. The last award of this evening is the Flora Lewis Award for Best Commentary and is sponsored by Paula Dwyer. The winner is Peter Beinart for Yavan, a Jewish case for the equality in Israel-Palestine, published by Jewish Currents. Beinart wrote a powerful essay with a lot of original thinking and drew on his impressive depth of knowledge about the history and politics of the conflict. The jury understood that his vision may be a fantasy, but it is a vision against which likelier outcomes can be measured.
I'm very grateful to the Overseas Press Club for this, this award for my essay, Yavna, A Jewish Case for Equality in Israel-Palestine. The essay would never have won any awards were it not been for, had it not been for my extraordinary editors, Ariel Angel and Nathan Goldman, and David Cleon, who did fact-checking. This piece was one that I labored with in my head for a long time before I began writing it, because it was a step outside of what I had believed for a long time, what I had grown up believing, which is in the idea of a Jewish state, a state that favors Jews over Palestinians. And it was a long process of coming to reconsider that, and it would not have been possible had I not benefited enormously from reading a great deal of particularly Palestinian writers who, through their insight and their empathy for the Jewish condition, were able to help me rethink things that had been very core to what I believed. So I'm very, very grateful for the award, and thank you for everyone who's made it possible.
Now, Peter could not join us tonight to accept his award in person, but he will receive it, and it is richly deserved. Now, we would like to show a list of all the journalists who won citations for excellence this year. Citations winners, please stand as we give you a round of applause as your names scroll the screen. Congratulations to each of you, and then please come up front to get your citations from Paula.
Wow, that was quite a hit parade, and those were just the citation winners. So I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. I want to thank John Avalon for being such a wonderful MC tonight. I want you to thank someone who has been working behind the scenes, Michael Smith, our video editor, for producing the award videos you saw tonight. And I want to again thank Bloomberg for hosting our after-dinner reception. The party continues. Please join us, everybody. Good night. We'll see you later.